Hello, and welcome back to the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and I'm really excited because today's podcast guest is somebody I've known for a really long time, but I finally get a chance to interview her face to face. Her name is Claire. She is a pediatric occupational therapist who has worked in school and community settings since 2005. She and Lauren started the Inspired Treehouse in 2013 and have developed the business into one of the top online resources for pediatric therapists around the world. And that is actually how I got to know Claire and Lauren, is through the Inspired Treehouse. I actually recommend it, and Coping Skills for Kids. And I think even Coping Skills for Teens, because I think it's such a wonderful resource. So Claire and Lauren also opened a nonprofit organization in Cleveland called the Treehouse, where they provide developmental play groups for children of all abilities. So on today's podcast, I get a chance to talk to Claire about what we're seeing with kids post-COVID and some sensory strategies that can be used both at home and at school. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Claire. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, Janine. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh my goodness. So you and I were talking before we started, and we have known each other for a very long time, it feels like.
Yes.
But I just want you to give an opportunity to share a little bit about you and your work and what you do so people can get a chance to know you.
Yeah, sure. So I am a pediatric occupational therapist since about 2005. And started my career in schools, and that's where I was for about 12 years of my career, working in school settings, primarily preschool and early elementary, and just working to support kids in their classroom and independence and participation in that setting. And I love the schools. That's definitely probably one of my favorite places to be, is in the schools. And then I met my business partner, Lauren Drobniak, and she's a physical therapist who worked with me there in the same school district. And we got to know each other, got to become friends, and really kind of shared this entrepreneurial, like, we know there's something else we want to do. So we kind of went around and around of what it was going to be and decided to start a blog, an online business that shares resources and ebooks and courses and all kinds of strategies for parents, teachers, and therapists, all about child development. So any aspect of child development, you name it, and we probably have something on our site. We started that in 2013, so we're going on our 10-year anniversary this fall. And yeah, we've loved it. We really didn't know anything about blogging when we started, and we dove right into it, and it's become a really huge resource that we're really, really proud of. And then we also in 2017 spun off and started an in-person nonprofit organization here in Ohio called the Treehouse. And that is where we provide developmental play groups for kids. So they're all therapist-led, supportive. It's a supportive setting for kids of all ability levels. Anybody can join us no matter what, where they might be in their journey of development. Some families find us because they have a child with a diagnosis, or they have concerns about their child's development. And some kids are really just in the community looking for somewhere fun to come and play and meet friends. And so we kind of have a mix of kids there. So that's kind of my story.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, your blog started around the time that Encourage Play, that
Okay.
my first blog started too, which is, I
Yeah,
think, why we dovetailed so
I'm
nicely.
sure that's why. Yeah.
And I used your resources all the time when I was running small groups, because I was running groups that sound very similar to the groups that you run at the Treehouse. And I found your resources so helpful and so fun and playful, but with the underpinning of child development there, of this is why you're doing this. This is why we're playing this game. This is how this is going to be helpful, which I think is so important for us to know. Play is so cool and so powerful and so important for kids, but it can also be a great learning activity, a great learning opportunity. So to be able to dovetail.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree. I think that's why we found you too, is that what we do, I'm an occupational therapist. My partner's a physical therapist. So we're sort of focused on the motor skills and the sensory processing pieces. But there's so much of what we do that taps into the social and self-regulation and coping world, which is your expertise. So it's kind of cool. We can kind of draw on each other and weave those things all together in one space. And yeah, play tends to be that that universal child experience that we can all use in different ways to tap into the different skills that we want to promote. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that interdisciplinarian team that is so huge. And that is one thing I do miss about working in schools is not having the multidisciplinary teams that can come together and talk about things from the different perspectives. Because just like you, I found a partner. My best friend is an OT. And
oh,
yeah, and so we ran groups together, and it was so funny. We would come up with an activity, but she would tell me what she was thinking about it from her OT's perspective, and I would say from the therapy's perspective. And it was like so interesting to watch it dovetail. It was so
I love that.
it gives me chills actually just
Yeah.
thinking about it because we had such a blast. And the thing was, she was always better at like the little kids, and I was better at like elementary, middle, and high
Mhm.
school too. But like she did like the preschool babies, and I would be in the group and I'd be like, Melissa, I'm not sure about this, but
Yes,
but
it
we were
helps.
right. It works together. And she would say the same thing if she had middle schoolers, she'd be like, I cannot. And I'm like, I'm right here. I got you.
We do that a lot. Lauren and I are the same way. And it happens all the time. Lauren's a very strong clinical mind. Like she just sees things from that perspective. She has such a good sense of kids' bodies and the way they move and the supports that they need. And that is not my side at all. Like I'm much more focused on behavior and focused on sensory processing. And she's actually really great with sensory too. But yeah, when we come together, we really see things from two different angles, but they always go together. And it just makes for so much creative brainstorming. And like, it's really a fun, it's the best. It's having that kind of partnership is really special. I feel very lucky for that.
It must be incredible to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and to work together and to just be able to process through things. And it helps you think about things in a different way. Like you,
Really.
yeah, like you totally start to see her perspective on it. So
Yeah,
it's,
you learn so much. I mean, that's exactly it, right? You're teaching and doing all the things with the kids, but you're learning as much as they are. So it's great.
yeah, I love it. So speaking of schools, so I actually also started in schools, actually, and so did my friend who's the OT. She still actually is working in schools as we speak. But one of the things that, when I talk with my teacher friends, when I talk with other educators, other school counselors, we have noticed a big change in behaviors since we returned to school after lockdowns were happening and even after like when mask mandates were taken away and we're all back into the classroom. Have you seen that too?
Yes, definitely. And so we're seeing it in our play groups, the kids that are coming in. We've just seen a really big difference in everything. Language has been a big thing where we start with our kids at the Treehouse when they're 2. So they're brand new little babies coming in, have never been dropped off anywhere before, have never been away from mom. And we've been doing this 5 years now. And this is the first year that we're like, oh, wow, this is a very noticeable difference. And language was such an obvious one, I think, to have like a whole new cohort of kids. And literally not one of the children in the group had any language at all at 2 years old. And so and we do tend to see kids who have delays across the board, but that was very out of the ordinary. And then as we work our way up to like the preschool and school age, we're seeing the same thing, just more challenges with sort of the basic self-regulation foundation things, right? Like, and we're hearing teachers say, like, we can't even get to academics. Like, that's not even on the radar. We're starting back at like waiting
Yeah.
and right, like taking turns and so those very fundamental social interactions and things like that are just, we're kind of like rewinding, kind of starting back at square one with those things. And we hear that across the board from all of our therapist friends, teacher friends. And yeah, we're seeing that firsthand too.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to sort of learn how to socialize in a school setting, and then you can get to the academic piece. And there's that like piece of also making sure that kids are feeling emotionally steady in order to do the
Right.
things that they need to do. Like the self-regulation piece is one I'm hearing, especially the older they get, the more dysregulation I'm hearing about, the more sort of like antsy and like wiggly and just having a really hard time following the rules.
Yeah.
Middle school, high school, it's still happening. Like it's happening. It's
Right.
happening. It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, those demands are definitely get more and more as kids get older. And then if you think about that gap where kids weren't there in school, so if you think about that age window, right, they're missing that sort of that transition. What would it be like between fifth and seventh or something, fifth and seventh grade? And that's where like a big leap happens and what you're expected to do. And I think, well, this kind of might segue into some of the other things we're going to talk about, but I think you see a decrease in the hands-on learning, the movement-based learning as you move to those older age groups, right? It's a lot more seated work. I know for my kids who are teenagers, they're on their computer a lot of the time during the day and a lot of sitting. And that's, those kids who were home during COVID kind of missed that slower transition and now showed up and we're like, here you go, here's your seat and here's your computer. So it's a big adjustment.
Yes, absolutely. So I also have teenagers as well. So my son started middle school in COVID. So he had been used to like one little happy family in elementary school. You
Yeah,
know how it goes, right? And
totally.
then middle school is like, oh my gosh, like you don't get recess. That's like a really hard thing, especially for a little boy who loves to
Yes.
move. Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
I know it. We must have kids the same age because I was the same. He was transitioning to middle school right during all that. And yeah, it was the same thing. He's a wiggly kid. He's a busy kid. He's really creative, loves all that kind of hands-on. And I think honestly, at their core, most kids kind of are that way. So it's hard when they're expected to, just sort of sit and be and attend for a long chunk of time.
Yeah, and I do have to say we moved districts at the beginning of this school year, and I will say they actually have opportunities for them to move and play,
Great.
which is I was like thrilled. I had no idea. I just moved to the district. I knew like the high school is phenomenal, like
Great.
great arts program, but I didn't know what the middle school setup was, and I was just going with the flow and hoping that things would be okay, and I would make it work if it didn't. But they had this like that they call it flex, where they have this opportunity. They play games, and it's also like when art stuff happens and other stuff happens. But like, even if you're in bands like he is, every other day you still get an opportunity to just like hang out and play. You play board games. You play. You can
So
go
great.
outside and like
Yeah.
run around. I was like,
Yes.
this is
So great. And I think that's so awesome to have that built into the framework of what you're doing. And then I also think there are ways for schools that don't. I wouldn't describe our school district maybe as being that way, but I do know that there are pockets of teachers who really have, right? Like that's their lens and that's just, they know that that's what works and they want to engage their learners and they know how to do it really well. I mean, they can do it better than anyone. So there are also ways to kind of like mix that into your everyday learning. And I've seen it in my own boys. Those are the teachers they love the most. Those are the teachers they respond to, that they participate, they try their best. It's just kind of a natural connection, I think.
well, and it makes sense for the teachers to do that too, like especially if they will notice if they are really super wiggly. And there are a couple teachers on his team who will be like, let's go outside, let's
Yeah.
play around a little bit, let's sit out in the courtyard, and then we'll come back in. I think that's phenomenal. And
Yeah.
it's such a breath of fresh air to be able to know that you have those pockets of teachers who are still like, yep, I understand
Yes.
development, I understand
Yeah.
kiddos, and I get the need for those who need to move.
Right. And can still operate within all of, I mean, I think teachers are amazing. Like just to say that, it blows me away. I love working with teachers. I think that there are teachers who do such a good job of still operating within the demands and parameters of all of what's put on them, from testing to, all of these requirements that they have to meet, and still to be able to do that in a creative, hands-on, engaging way. I think that's like so impressive. And I know so many of them who do it so well. So it's really
No,
great.
absolutely. I like coming from a family of teachers, I've always had the utmost of respect for teachers, but it's like this art of teaching that
Mhm.
is there for, especially for like really seasoned people who are still out there and doing it. Like they're not, just checking off a year, you know what I mean? They're in there, they're
Yeah.
doing it. They want to get in and help the kids. And they want to figure it out. And I think it's incredible,
Yeah.
especially given everything that happened during
Right.
COVID for
Right.
educators.
How easy to burn out and understandable to feel
Yeah,
burnt out.
absolutely understandable to burn out. And if you're choosing to take a different path, that's good for you.
Right.
You know what? I did the same thing. I used to work
Right.
in schools and I don't anymore.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I get it 100%. So
yeah. So for those people who are in schools, what sort of sensory strategies would you think could be helpful for the things that we're seeing with kids in terms of their behavior and self-regulation?
yeah. So like I was saying, I think there are definitely the last thing I want to do when I'm a therapist coming in to maybe consult on a kid or work with a kid in a classroom is to like plunk down a big like binder of things for the teacher to do, right? It's like their worst nightmare. And like your main goal as a therapist coming into the school is to make friends with the teacher, because otherwise nothing's going to happen. Like you don't want to be giving them more work. You don't want to make their day harder. It's already hard enough. So you're trying to ease things by giving simple strategies to kind of weave things into what they're already doing, right? And I think that's such a key, rather than trying to say, let's add this in, let's add, another requirement, another demand to an already hugely demanding job. So I really like to focus just kind of on a couple of things. Like when we kind of see it's very similar issues popping up, right? Kids who have trouble sitting in their seat, kids who are very fidgety and they're wandering, having trouble with attention, and then kids who are maybe a little bit rough, pushing, crashing, jumping, falling out of their seat. They're kind of like the star of the show, right? Like you can't miss them. They're front and center. And so we really like to hone in on what we refer to as our movement senses. So everybody kind of learns about sensory processing, and we learn about our, sights and sound and touch. And those are all obviously very important things, but we usually don't talk about the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system. And those things are like, I think, such huge missing links to most people's understanding of how our sensory systems work. And they're so important for self-regulation. So it's like without those, we're really missing a big, we have a gap, right, in our understanding of what can support healthy development and engagement and attention and regulation. So just to kind of, should I give a little overview of what those things
That
are?
I would absolutely love for you to do that because I'm familiar with it. I also have
Okay.
a sensory processing kid, so
Yeah, so okay. Well, and feel free to chime in since you know these things too, but if in case there's anything I miss. But so if we're talking about proprioceptive input or the proprioceptive system, we're talking about anything that requires you to push or pull or move your body or exert force against a resistance. And then we can also build like jumping, pounding, crashing into that. So you're really thinking about pretty intense input to your body. Examples would be like pushing something heavy. Like my son downstairs is always moving my furniture around to make forts and things like that. We refer to that as heavy work. And heavy work is that it's proprioceptive input. It's found to be very calming and organizing input for many kids. And it's something that we can kind of, again, we can talk about this more, but build into the day. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, this is proprioceptive time. Hopefully we can make little pockets that are already happening and just sort of put our lens on that as building that into the activities that the kids are already doing. Does that sound consistent with your understanding?
yes, absolutely. Like I always think about like carrying a backpack, like carrying something
Yeah.
heavy, carrying heavy books, like
Yep.
exactly a way to get them actually calmer. And like it's really neat to see when you do that and you're like, oh, okay, you're getting yourself calm now. This is incredible.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like if you look at a kid doing these, you can see it's like grounding them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's like actually what is happening physically to their bodies. They're being, they're working themselves against that resistance. So that's the first thing. And then the other system is the vestibular system. And so this is anything that's kind of a little harder to explain, but anything really, if you think about moving the position of your head. And so we're talking about our system is the vestibular system is centered in the ear. And so it's very closely tied to balance. And when we move our head, we have fluid in our ears that moves and tells us where our head and our body are in space. And so if you think vestibular, it's easier to give examples. Vestibular input is like swinging, swaying, rocking, spinning, those things where you're kind of having those position changes of your head in space. And then your body needs to respond to that, right? Like if I'm leaning way to the side, my body needs to catch myself so I don't fall. So the vestibular system is also another really important movement sense. And we might see for kids who are seeking out more of this, they're fidgety, they're up out of their seats constantly. You might see them rocking and swaying in their seat. You might see a kid who spins and spins and spins around. That's what they're looking for, is more of that type of movement input.
Yeah, absolutely. My son used to actually like twist his body on the couch and like watch TV upside down.
Upside down. Yes.
Read upside down. And I'm like,
yes.
Okay.
He's doing it, right? You giving yourself what you need.
If that's what it takes, fine. We can watch it upside down.
If it works for you, right?
Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. It's always what works for the child in front of you. And sometimes it looks a little bit different. But I love how, there are ways that you can build this into, things at school. And it doesn't have to be super big and complicated, right? And same for home. You can build this in, like you let your kid move furniture. Cool. Like
right. It's just part of our day, right? And then we clean it up when he's done. Like it's, just sort of, I don't even think of that. I don't even think of it necessarily as being, oh, this is a sensory thing I'm doing for him, but it totally is. I mean, when I look at it through the therapy lens, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. But in the meantime, he's just having a blast, like being like making little forts and whatever. And it sounds phenomenal, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. It's great. Entertaining for everyone.
The cat I'm on board. Are there any other strategies that you would want to recommend in terms of sensory that would be helpful for either at home or at school? Some of your like the top ones that you find to be most helpful.
Yeah, a couple that these are great for home or school. Now that I think of it, I was thinking of them in terms of school, but you could easily do these at home with kids, especially now, like on summer break, if people are home with kids during the summer and like feeling the burn of very active kids. And I don't know about you, but we've had like terrible weather here, rain this summer. Yep. So it's like, trying to keep everybody active and sane can be a challenge. But again, like I think the most important thing is remembering that it doesn't have to be this carved out like, oh, it's our exercise time, right? It's not quite the same as like a strengthening exercise program. In fact, it's much more important to build it in throughout the day, because that input, you can't really just do it once in the morning and then, okay, now I'm going to be regulated for the rest of the day. It's not right. Like you kind of need to sprinkle it in throughout for it to be most effective. And so we can do this. I love doing it during transition times. So for teachers who are, I remember at the school where I used to work, it was waiting in line for the bathroom, and the kids would be like all over touching each other and touching the walls and talking to everyone and pushing. And so we started with one of the kindergarten classrooms. I was like, this is just going to be my intervention time, because they're standing there for 15 minutes. Like we might as well use it. So we came up with, different little games and songs and, pushing on the wall. We would do wall pushes. We would do wall sits and who can hold it the longest. I can share links. I don't know if you're able to share links with people who listen, but we have links to some things that are like hallway waiting games, and we hung them up on the hallway and they would just do those things while they were waiting. So it was like this dead time that we might as well organize into something that is playful and fun, and like also giving the input that kids need. But we also, for other transitions, just changing the way that you move from one place to another. So if it's time to go to the bath, can you jump there like a frog? Or can you, my kids love, my kids at home are too big for it now, but my kids at work love when I hold them under their arms and do big jumps. And, can we jump all the way to the bath like this? That's both vestibular and proprioceptive input. It's such a great connecting relationship building activity too. I know I have so many kids who just respond really well to that because it's fun and exciting. So we just kind of try to think about how we can change the way they're moving from one thing to another. If you're at school, is there something that you're allowed to do that's not too rowdy in the hallway, you know, as you're walking from one class to maybe lunch or something? Like, can everybody, I had one teacher who we would bring like one of those cardboard blocks or two of them, and we would put them down in the hallway. And as the kids came to it, everybody had to jump over the obstacle. And then the last kid would grab it and bring it to the front. And it was just kind of like a little leapfrog game, kind of, you know?
Yeah.
We also used to do something called hall passes, and we would make weighted hall passes. So it would be like whatever the kid would think was fun, like a birthday present. And we would put like an ankle weight inside of it and wrap it like a birthday present. And they would have, it'd be something small that they could take as their hall pass to the bathroom or to the office or to another classroom, or any kind of weight, a stuffed animal, and sew a weight inside of it. And they would carry that with them. And that would be like their transition object, and kind of building in that heavy work. Again, during like what would be a dead time, right? They're just walking from one place to another.
Yeah, the transition periods are a great opportunity. That's when I tell teachers that it's a great time to work on coping skills, like when you're transitioning in from recess, coming back into the classroom. That's a great time to do some relaxation and breathing so that you can get everybody settled and ready to get back to work.
Yeah.
You know, I had never heard of a weighted pass before. That's brilliant. I love
I don't
that.
remember what we had a kid. It was like, you know, when you have to think of something to solve the problem, it was like one of those moments where we're like, what are we going to do? This kiddo, I know, just wanted to touch. He was tearing down all the things, not on purpose, but he wanted to touch everything. So all the bulletin boards in the hallway and everything, we're like, buddy, what can we give you to put in your hands for you to do? And then it became like we had just a bin where it was all these fidget toys that no one had access to except for transition. So they were like our hall passes. So you can pick a hall pass and then pick it up and go. And then the kids can, you know, you can give access to the ones that you think fit which kids' needs. So
I love this. Oh my goodness. I could talk to you
I know.
forever about this. This is so much fun, but I want to be respectful of your time. And if you could just let people know, there's something that you had, like the therapist informed classroom. Can you tell people a little bit about that?
Yes. So we're so excited about this course. We've had so many, really since COVID, so many teachers emailing and messaging on social media, like saying all these same issues that we've discussed here. Like, I'm really struggling in the classroom. I'm burnt out. I'm overwhelmed. And it's a lot of it is those fundamental skills, those more basic skills. The teachers know how to teach, right? And many of them are also very well versed in what we're talking about as far as the social and self-regulation skills too. But I think it's just overwhelming when you're expected to do all of that. How can you possibly, you know? So we were like, what can we come up with, again, that isn't going to be dumping a bunch of work on, here's this long course you have to sit there and watch, because who has time, and then who has the energy at the end of the day after doing what you've done all day to sit in front of a screen and do more of it. So we're like, how can we like spin this into something that is digestible and accessible and easy to use, like when you need it? And so we actually went through a couple of different like iterations of it and finally arrived at a self-paced course that is housed on a platform called Thinkific. And so the teachers have access, you purchase the course once, and then all of these things are like a little library for you. And it's like a dashboard that you can click into. It is not video based at all. It's short chunks of really just kind of introductory reading about a topic, and then like handouts and printables and things that you can use right away. And that way you can go in and just look for that one topic, or that, you know, you have one child that you're focused on that you want to go and find the resource that fits. You go in, you grab it, and then you can come back to it when you need the next thing. So it's not such a huge demand on time. But it's called the Therapist Informed Classroom, and we can share a link to that too. But it covers, I mean, every topic that we've talked about here, and including, you know, seating options and attention and posture, motor skills, strengthening, all those things that you might be running into in the classroom. Definitely the self-regulation and transitions and group management, all that stuff kind of packed into one course.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible resource. I think people are really going to be excited about that. I mean, I think it's an incredible thing to be able to just have people have that opportunity to be able to like go and look, because I often find, when I'm even now when I'm working with a kid and I'm trying to figure it out, like I'm like searching Pinterest, I'm searching Google, I'm looking at like there's
It's
always
all
different.
different places.
Right. And to be able to have a lot of ideas in one place is phenomenal. So we'll
Yeah,
share a link to that in the show notes. So if people want to check that out, they can do so.
great.
And then, I always like to ask my guests before we wrap up, what are your coping skills? How do you rest and recharge and relax?
Yes, this actually, I was glad that this was going to be one of the questions because I just recently kind of got hit in the face with one of my coping mechanisms that I didn't know was so important, I guess. But every day at the same time of day, right around like 4:30 or 5 o'clock is like my 1 hour, and it's exercise. I walk, I run, I get on my bike, whatever it is. And I know that I do that, but I kind of thought I did it for the exercise. And then we went on a trip. My mom and I take my three boys on an RV camping trip every year. So we went and we took our RV trip. And by the end of it, I was so crabby and so cranky and short tempered. And like, I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm just not myself. And my mom and I were talking, and I said, that's it. It's the exercise, but it's also like really needing an hour by myself, just quiet or listening to my book, whatever, away from everyone. And so that is probably my number one most necessary coping strategy that I use every day.
You know what? It's interesting to figure out like what you need, and you don't notice it until it's gone, right? Like then suddenly
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, why am I in this space right now? This is very
Yeah.
strange." And then like to do the unpacking of like, "Oh, I haven't had my alone time," which is super necessary for introverts.
Yes, it is. And I find myself, I need a lot of quiet and a lot of time. And in the summers, I mean, I have 100 teenagers running through the house at any given time. So it's like even more important during those months where I'm like, no, I have to take my step away to come back and feel like I'm recharged and able to give everybody what they need. So
Oh, that's incredible. I love it. I think that's phenomenal. I'm so glad you figured that out, and I hope that you
yes,
keep that up.
yes, I
Um,
will.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And thank you to everybody who's listening. If you like this podcast, feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. And as always, take a few minutes, have a little fun, and have an awesome day.